My name is Andrew Stotz, and I'll be your host as we continue our journey into the teachings of Dr. W. Edwards Deming. Today, I'm continuing my discussion with David P. Langford, who has devoted his life to applying Dr. Deming's philosophy to education, and he offers us his practical advice for implementation. The topic for today is improving performance. Who's at fault? David, take it away.
Hello again. So we are on point number 8 on Deming's role of a manager of people. And it says he will study results with the aim to improve his performance as a manager of people. So once again, Deming wasn't into all the pronouns that we use now and everything. So when he says he means he, she, anybody that's a manager of people. So our aim is to improve performance in everything that we do, right? So I think what's going on with this simple point that he's making is to get people to think about when things go right or things go wrong, who's at fault, or who gets the reward or who gets the blame for that process. And as a manager, if things are going well, of course, everybody wants to take credit for that, whether you're a teacher or superintendent, business owner, or whatever. Then it was, the same way in politics, right? Everything's going well. Oh, I did it all. And if things are not going well, then obviously it was somebody else's fault, right? Or if you're a manager of people, like what Deming is talking about here, we have a tendency to blame the individual without first thinking about ourselves as the manager of that situation. So I was just coaching a group of teachers and talking to them about how difficult it is to really think like that as a teacher, because you think, okay, I worked really, really hard on this lesson. I got everything prepared. I came in and I did it. And, I don't know how many times I've heard teachers say something like, well, I taught them, but they didn't get it. Well, that's probably the problem, right? You taught them, but they didn't learn it, which is two different things. It's possible to teach and get learning, but it's better to create actual learning experiences through that process. So you have to think about, if I'm not getting good results, I don't care what your position is as a manager of people, I have to, turn the finger of blame back towards me and start to say, okay, what am I doing differently? And that's a hard pill to swallow when you start to think like that. And because usually, most people are trying to put in their best efforts. And, Deming said many times we're being killed by best efforts, which is like a crazy thought to think about. Wow, you mean I shouldn't be trying hard? Well, you should be working in the right way. So if you're not getting the results that you want, probably the very first thing is to go back to the people that you manage and ask them what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong, or what could be improved. And I have seen this with just very little kids, like 3, 4, 5-year-olds, when the teacher says, oh, we just went through that lesson and it seemed like some of you weren't interested, what was the problem? And they'll tell you, oh, you went too fast, or we didn't have time to think about it, or we needed more time, or they'll tell you exactly what the problem is. And it's usually a better way to go than having your supervisor come in and do an observation, because your supervisor probably isn't there every day watching how you're managing people, how you're communicating, how you're having conversations, etc. But the people are there every day. And if we're talking about education and kids in classrooms, I mean, they're the ones that are experiencing your management style. And I've found out that the more you ask, the better they get at giving you advice, telling you what to do. And when you do it, then you get even better advice. So I remember, I think I may have told this story before, but I remember I had a new student that came to class, and I was in a project like that, and I asked the students, I said, just take out some sticky notes or whatever you want to, and write down a few thoughts about how you think this last project went, what could have been improved, how we could have changed it, what I might do differently next year, et cetera, just things like that. Well, this new student, he was just like blowing this off, and he was not paying attention. He's screwing around, everything else. And I'll never forget one of the students that had been there all year. She turned to him and she said, "You better take this seriously, because he's going to do whatever we tell him."
Wait, what?
And I'll never forget the look on that kid's face. It was just like, oh, and then he started to sit up and take it seriously. So
yeah, well, it's one of the interesting points about that is, when you ask for feedback, how do you receive it? I have a bunch of interns working for me right now, and I asked them to go through one of my online courses and write down feedback, in a document, a shared document that they're all writing into. It's brutal, David. It's brutal. And then when I see some stuff, my first reaction, I can't do that because I can't fix that because of, and it's just so hard to, it's hard enough to ask, but it's even harder to receive in a way that you're able to really use that to improve yourself.
One time I kept getting feedback from the students saying you're going too fast, or you're talking too fast, or can't understand it, or we need more time to process what you're saying. Or I said, well, okay, I've been doing this a long time, so I've got habits, and so I don't always know that I'm doing that. So let's work out a signal or something that if that's happening, you can just suddenly kind of signal me that, okay, we need some reflection time here or something to happen. And so they came up with this idea that they would, pull on their earlobe if I was going too fast or working through stuff. It was very disconcerting to, I'm into something, I'm really explaining a concept, and I think I'm really doing a good job. And you look out and you see about 6 people going like this, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm doing it again. But
that's one of the things
Deming
that was
lost
in the Zoom era, is harder to read the audience too, just to even figure out if people are understanding.
Absolutely. But Deming often said, help comes from the outside and by invitation. So when you're inviting those students or workers or whoever you might be managing to give you that feedback, it's just really amazing what can be accomplished like that. There's almost no problem that can't be solved by using the people actually doing the work to give you the feedback.
When we started this episode, the one thing I started thinking about was that great, that saying that we all probably heard when we were growing up is you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And my mom said that to me, and my dad or anybody, I'd heard it a lot. But I guess what I thought when I heard you kick off this episode, I thought to myself, yeah, but what if you led them to the wrong pool of water or the wrong place? And that, like, there's a responsibility on the side of the teacher or the administrator to make sure that it's not enough to absolve yourself. Hey, I did it and they didn't drink it. That's not acceptable, or that's not enough.
Yeah. Over the last 40 years, I've heard some awful things from teachers saying things about students, about, how, privately or not, this kid just doesn't want to try or doesn't care, or this kid isn't one of them that came to mind was this student isn't even worth my effort. So how do you know that?
Yeah.
And Deming said, why would I give somebody a grade when I don't know who among them is going to turn out to be great someday? And I might be limiting them with a grade at that point in time. But a feedback, information on feedback about how to improve, wow, people really receive that really well. So
Yeah. Yep.
I think that's really what he's talking about here in point 8. And I think it's pretty simple, but it's tough to do.
So let's wrap this up by first, I'm going to just read point 8 again. And this, remember that for everybody, I forgot to say it at the beginning, but this is from the role of a manager of people section of New Economics. And point number 8, he will study results with the aim to improve his performance as a manager of people. And, I think one of the things that stands out is study results also. What is the result that we're getting? And some of the things that we talked about is like asking the question, what can I improve as a manager of people? How do I seek out information to do that? And you said the more you ask, the more and the better advice that you get. And you also mentioned his quote that help comes from the outside and by invitation. And so I think the main thing is, being on a path and a desire to improve yourself as a manager of people. Anything that you would add to that?
Well, what he's after is how do we go about improving? I mean, the classic way we do stuff is, we send somebody to a conference or where go get them some training, or now put them on an online thing that they go through, and all those kinds of things. And what Deming is really saying is, look, study the results. You need to know how you are doing. And once you start to figure that out, then they are going to do a whole lot better. So.
Fantastic. Well, David, on behalf of everyone at Deming Institute, I want to thank you again for this discussion. For listeners, remember to go to Deming.org to continue your journey. Listeners can learn more about David at langfordlearning.com. This is your host, Andrew Stotz, and I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes from Dr. Deming. People are entitled to joy in work.